Hi, I'm Michael Embry and I'm with the Kentucky Book Fair. And welcome to our second of 4 programs previewing the 33rd Annual Kentucky Book Fair, which will be held November 15th at the Frankfort Convention Center. It'll be held from 9 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. It's a free event. We'll have nearly 200 authors attending. They'll be signing their books, they'll be talking about their books, and some authors will be reading from their books as part of the symposiums and other activities that go on throughout the day. Now, the Kentucky Book Fair, I guess, unofficially begins November the 14th with our Children's Day at the Frankfort Convention Center from 9 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. And we'll have about 35 authors there, children's authors, and they'll be leading discussions, talking about their books, doing artist type things for kids. So it's a fun day, and it's all free. Now, the Kentucky Book Fair, in its 33 years, has raised more than or nearly $370,000, and all the proceeds go to benefit Kentucky public and school libraries as well as literacy programs. So when you go there and you buy a book, you're helping your public libraries across the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, there'll be symposiums and readings, and there'll be some activities over at the old Capitol. All kinds of books there, sports, cookbooks, nonfiction, history, anything you want, you'll find it at the Kentucky Book Fair. Now, we'll have some of the authors attending will be Nick Clooney. He'll be there with Gigi Phillips, and they've written a book about some famous Kentuckians. And Nick's a great guy, and I think you probably have heard of his son, George Clooney. There's Madeline Rue. She's a New York Times best-selling author of young adult novels. Wendell Berry, one of the most famous authors in Kentucky. He'll be there with another book this year. Romance writer Elizabeth Beverly of Louisville. Children's authors Debbie Dady, George Ella Lyon, Marcia Thornton Jones. Mark Kurlansky, he's a cookbook author. And he'll be here the day before introducing Martha Reeves and the Vandellas in a concert at the Grand Theater. So that's a little Motown with that as well. And if you like music, there's a lady by the name of Louise Harrison. She's written a book called My Kid Brother's Band. Now, if you think about it, Harrison. Yep, George Harrison's sister. She's going to be here. So they say she's a lot of fun. She'll be talking to at one of the symposiums on Saturday, reminiscing about Brother George. Ann Ross, a best-selling author from North Carolina. She's got 2 new books. Gary West and Kenny Davis, they've written a book about the 1972 Olympics basketball game, one of the most controversial games ever. And Kenny, he played for Georgetown College, was a member of that 1972 team. Another one is Gwen Hyman Rubio. She's written a book called Love and Ordinary Creatures. A few years ago, she had an Oprah bestseller with Icy Sparks, so she's got a new book this year, so you need to stop by and talk to her. So it's a fun day, and it's free. It's a family event. You can't go wrong. It's one of the signature events in Kentucky. And so be sure and mark down your calendar for November 14th and 15th. And today we have 3 authors who'll be participating. We have Jerry Deaton, Jim Prichard, and Russ Hatter, and I want to welcome the 3 of you here.
Thank you.
And Jerry, let's start with you. What book do you have this year?
Well, I have my second book out, Mike. Very fortunate to be back again. It's called Kentucky Boy, My Life in 20 Words.
Okay.
What I did with that, it was actually my first book. I started it probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I had a thought. My wife and I were in Breathitt County one day, and we were driving, I think probably over to Buckhorn, and she made the odd comment about how envious she was that I was from someplace that I felt an attachment to. She's from Bullitt County in the Louisville area, and she said she just didn't have that same attachment really to the people and the place and the land that I had to Breathitt County, and she actually said she was envious. And I thought, I've never heard that before. Usually it's somebody making fun of Eastern Kentucky or saying something kind of derogatory about us. It's not usually wishing they could have been from there. But what I took from that was I thought, well, I'm going to start writing some stories about that. And I thought, well, a memoir, I didn't have anything particularly tragic or outstanding that happened to me, but I had a good life. I had a very good life, happy boyhood, wouldn't trade it for anything. It gave me the foundation for what I am today. So I thought, well, I'm going to come up with 20 words that defines my life there, my young boyhood life there. First one came to mind was trailer, because I lived in a 60 by 12 foot mobile home for 13 years with 5 other people.
Okay.
And that got interesting, to say the very least. I worked at a sawmill. My dad's sawmill. I'm a 5th generation sawmill Deaton. So we had terrible luck with that sawmill, and so I wrote about that. I was a Presbyterian boy in an evangelical Baptist world. So church was one of my words, and I wanted people to know about all the situations I got myself into, and including altar calls and revivals that I had no idea how to get out of. So that was another word. Christmas, I wanted people to know what it was like to have 50 people cram into a house, all Deatons, every year. People just piled on each other sleeping at night. So came up with 20 different words, and that's my book this year.
Is it targeted to young adults, or is it for a
I
family
think every
type thing,
12-year-old boy, first of all, in the state ought to have to read
course.
that. But it's also, I read it to a group of senior citizens in Louisville a couple of weeks ago, and they absolutely loved the church. So it's like my first book. It really is meant, I would say, if anywhere from 10 to 95 would enjoy this book, and could really, if you have any kind of rural background or interest in a rural background, it would be something for you. I had a 70-year-old man from Breathitt County call me after he bought it and say, well, I'm about 20 years older than you, but I could relate to everything in it, because I wrote it about the 60s and the 70s, growing up in that era. So it rings true pretty much, even back for the 40s and 50s, I would say.
Well, I remember, your first book was Appalachian Ghost Stories, right?
Correct.
And Tales from Bloody Breathitt. So Breathitt has really made a...
Well, people ask me why I'm not writing about my days lobbying in the Capitol, because I've got some pretty good stories there too, but for some reason, Breathitt County and my early days there just really have my attention right now. Of course, I've got 2 books on it now and a film, so Breathitt County has really caught my attention.
Now, what's the film?
The Feuds of Bloody Breathitt. We had the worst feuds. We made the Hatfields and McCoys look like a Sunday slap fight. They had 12 killed in 12 years. We had 40 killed in 11 months alone in 1902. And our feuds went on for 42 years, and my family was heavily involved in it. And I just decided nobody was going to do a film on that, and people were forgetting about it, and you probably don't even know about it either, or our audience. I wanted people to know that this was the worst feud in the state by far. Started because of the Civil War. We probably had hundreds of people killed in it. And my family, I found my great-great-grandpa Bob's name in a book up in the Capitol back in 1986, where he'd killed a man in the feuds. And nobody in my family had never talked about that. So.
And you're working on a second film now?
I am.
Is another Breathitt?
No, I'm moving a little further south. I'm going to pick up Harry Cottle this time and do a life story on Harry Cottle.
Okay. Well, I know you're proud of your Breathitt County heritage, and I've known some other people from Breathitt County, and it's really not that unusual. I don't think, because they've always expressed the same love and.
Well, we're probably one of the more well-known counties in the state. I think Breathitt County is one that we really feel an attachment to it. We've got a pretty big name. We have a Breathitt County Day here in Frankfort every year for sort of expatriates that live in central Kentucky, and we'll have 125 people there every year at the VFW post. So people are proud of being from Breathitt County.
Well, I remember, growing up, Breathitt County had very good basketball program with Fiercey Woods as the
Well,
coach.
we have
and-
at one point we had an indoor, we were a pretty poor county, but we have a beautiful domed arena with all wood on the inside, just gorgeous, just a beauty. And now we have the only covered football stands in the state for our prize football team.
Oh, okay. What do you think is important for people to share memories like you have done? Not only Breathitt County, but maybe Pike or Franklin or
Everybody's got a story. Now, whether they can write it down or not in a pleasing way is a different matter, but every single person has a story. My story is that I wanted people to know we had good, solid upbringings. I had a dad that played games with me, took a lot of interest in me, grandmother, mother, extended families. I wanted people to see that we did have good lives back there, because most of the time people, when anybody writes something or makes a film about Eastern Kentucky, it leaves a black eye and a pretty bad taste in people's mouths back there. And there's no doubt there's a downside to it, but it's also a phenomenal place to have grown up. I would not trade it for anything. Made me the adult worker that I am, gave me my character, my work ethic, everything, and I still have that deep, deep attachment to the people and the culture and the land that so many people. My last story in there is entitled "Leaving," and it's pretty much about why I decided I could not stay there any longer. I wanted to badly. I had my holler picked out where I was going to build a house and marry my little high school girlfriend, and we were going to live there happily ever after. And going to college kind of changed that for me. Changed my perspective, and I went back there for a few months after college and just realized it was no longer for me. So leaving is the very last word in that chapter, and I think it sums up for a lot of people who left, why they left, but still have that feeling that they either should not have or wish they could have stayed.
Yeah, you left, but it's still a big part of it.
Oh,
You're
huge
taking
part.
it with you.
Yeah.
And do you have any other books in the works right now?
Well, I have 2 books.
Okay, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Fortunate to have 2 books accepted to the book fair this year. What really got me started, fellas, in writing was a writers group in Louisville called the Cherokee Roundtable. And a friend of mine, Reggie Van Stockham, took me one day and got to read an article I'd written for a magazine on trucks. 3 fellows here in town and myself, Warner Keynes, Jimmy Rogers, and Ronnie Miller, all restored a pickup truck. And I wrote an article about it and sent it to a national magazine, and it got published. So I read this to this group and was just intrigued with them. They liked the story. The more I read, I would take my little stories about Breathitt County and my ghost stories, and I would read them to them to see if an audience of well-disciplined, experienced writers liked my stuff, and they loved it. They started in 1987. So what I did was I asked them one day, they'd never published anything as a group. So I told them I have some experience publishing. This is the 3rd book I've published, so I told them that if they would all come up with a Christmas story, a Christmas work, that I would try to publish a book by the Cherokee Roundtable. And I've got Ann Cottle, Harry Cottle's widow, several playwrights. I got a play from a fellow in Paris, France, who was an original member of the Cherokee Roundtable, and it's stunning at the end. It just gives you chills what this little short play this man has written. I had a Jewish lady send in a story. It's just full of wonderful memoir pieces, poetry, plays. So it is really a fantastic book by some really experienced writers.
How many contributors do you have to
43.
this? 43.
43 of them.
And I assume being a Christmas book, it's for all ages?
It is. They're funny, they're sad. I actually, and I'm the editor, and I was brought to tears by 6 of them as I went through. And so it really is, there's some emotional stories in it. A lot of it is memoir type stuff, so there's a lot of history about how Christmases were. My little piece in there is on my Deaton family Christmas. One friend of mine wrote a space-age science fiction story about my family back in Breathitt County and submitted it, and I put it in there. So it's got some unusual stuff. and as well as some, just really touching memoir pieces as well.
Now, what's the title of it again?
It's called Christmas Greetings, and this particular, the card, Russ, is a 1933 Christmas card sent to my great-grandmother by a cousin in Cynthiana.
Fantastic.
And I couldn't really come up with anything else for the cover, so I remembered I had a bunch of her old Christmas cards, and I found that one particular, and it said Christmas Greetings on it. So I decided that was going to be the title of my book as well. So it's Christmas Greetings, and it's a really old style Christmas card is the cover. So, and then an anthology, of course, of the writers there in the Cherokee Roundtable.
Okay, well, thanks, Jerry.
Sure.
Glad you could be here. Our next guest are Jim Prichard and Russ Hatter. They're kind of tied in together with your new book. And your book is?
Embattled Capital.
Okay.
And it's the story of Kentucky's capital city during the Civil War. I've always followed an approach of maybe working from the ground up, because a lot of historians will cast a broad net. But the Kentucky story, the American story, is a patchwork quilt or a mosaic. And so it's interesting what you can discover, what you can learn, and what you can find if you limit your focus to a region. I've done a lot of research on the Civil War era in Appalachia and the feud era. And again, what you could find just by studying this community, the capital of the state, during the conflict. And I made some discoveries, learned a lot of new perspectives about Civil War history. And of course, Kentucky's role in the conflict was unique, and Frankfort's nonetheless. Frankfort was the only loyal state capital to be occupied by Confederate forces during the Civil War. As a matter of fact, on Sunday I gave a presentation at Perryville during the annual Civil War reenactment, and I pointed out that that particular hallowed ground was, militarily speaking, the high water mark of the Civil War in the West for the Confederacy. But symbolically, that high water mark took place here in front of the old Capitol building downtown when the Confederate authorities inaugurated a Confederate governor who was in the Capitol probably 4 hours before they were forced to retreat. And then what was even more colorful and interesting in another sense was that this was the only loyal state capital that was actually attacked by Confederate forces during the Civil War in the summer of 1864. Detachment of John Morgan's raiders attacked the city, focusing primarily on Fort Boone. And what made it a unique story was that Governor Thomas Bramlett, our wartime governor at that time, grabbed a rifle, went up into the trenches, and fought shoulder to shoulder with the little patchwork force of defenders, primarily militia. Future Chief Justice John M. Harlan, who was at that time the Kentucky Attorney General, was there in the trenches. Secretary of State Van Winkle and other high government officials were in the trenches that when this particular raid was repulsed. So again, there were a lot of colorful, different and unique stories that not only tell the story of this particular city, but I think also brought out some new details about the Civil War in Kentucky as well.
Okay. Now yourself, your background, I understand you've worked, 22 years as a supervisor in the research department of...
Supervised the research room for the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. I'm native of Dayton, Ohio originally, but all of my people come from Jesse Stewart country over in the Little Sandy Valley, the Elliott, Carter, Greenup, and Boyd County area. And of course, prior to that, many of my ancestors came through Breathitt, Pike, and some of the mountain counties. So I've, a lot of things that this gentleman shared with us were, struck a chord with me. And after I retired from the state in '08, moved to Louisville, and I work part-time right now as a cataloger for the Filson Historical Society. And that's like being a kid in a candy shop.
I can imagine. Well, I understand you're a member of the Louisville Civil War Roundtable,
Yes.
You've had an interest in the Civil War for many, many years, haven't you?
My grandparents were the grandchildren of the Civil War generation, and I spent countless summers in northeastern Kentucky with my grandparents. And television was still kind of a new thing. But once the evening news went off, they went out on the porch where it was cool, and they would tell stories. And sometimes old friends, and brothers and sisters, my great uncles and aunts would come by. And of course, they would tell me the stories about what happened locally during the Civil War, what their grandfathers did during the Civil War. And of course, right about that same time was the Civil War centennial 50 years ago. And so I cut my teeth on the works of Bruce Catton and Burke Davis and Douglas Southall Freeman and all the great popular historians of that era. And it's never left me.
Well, this book here, how long did you research it, and how long did it take to write it?
It was a long process in a sense. It was about 6 years, and if the truth were known, I would have liked to have spent another year or two.
Right.
There are still some areas that I felt that needed to be covered, but it kind of circles around to what I shared at the beginning. Working from the ground up, and one of the things I've noticed about popular historians and popular histories of Kentucky during the Civil War